Good afternoon, everybody. I've been a storyteller for as long as I can remember, and one of my earliest theatrical memories is performing skits in my grandparents' living room on holidays. Starting when I was around 5 years old, every family gathering would begin with me corralling my cousins and younger brother upstairs around the old electric typewriter in my grandparents' bedroom. Once there, we'd brainstorm, write the show, make the program, and pick the music, and after a little while, it was showtime. Things would inevitably go wrong, lines would be forgotten, props would get lost, and sometimes the grown-ups would have pretty different reactions than we were anticipating. It wasn't until years later I realized some of our dramas were actually comedies. But despite any obstacles, as true thespians do, we persevered. We rolled with the punches, and we made it work. As I continued to grow with the ongoing support of my parents, I found more and more outlets for my burgeoning passions. And one summer at Camp Eagle Feather, I was under the drama tent playing a theater game called, wait for it, Verbal Vomit. It sounds gross, but stick with me. Essentially, you're given a topic and have to speak as if you're an expert. Doesn't matter if what you're saying is factually accurate, just no ums or erms or pauses allowed, and whoever goes on the longest wins. At risk of sounding smug, I totally owned at this game. Any topic you could throw at me, I would go on for minutes to the simultaneous awe and chagrin of my fellow campers. Years later, I was able to put these strange talents to the test once again, this time at Trinity College as part of the Orientation Week exercises, specifically the Joseph C. Clark Extemporaneous Public Speaking Contest. It's a slightly loftier title than Verbal Vomit, but it's essentially the same thing. And I am happy to say that I won first place. Now, I bring this up not only to brag, but to share with you what I discovered is the key to this silly game, and that is this: say yes. That's the number one rule when you're doing improvisation games. Accept what you're given and make it work. If you don't like it, use it anyway. Turn your garbage into gold. There's another part of these games that made it easier for me to succeed too. There were rules. There was a framework. I had to stay on topic and present myself appropriately, but beyond that, it was up to me. I had to color within the lines, but the materials, textures, and patterns were all my own. Verbal Vomit is a structured improvisation game. There are hundreds, thousands of these played every day in classrooms and rehearsal halls and living rooms and stages all around the world. And what makes these games different than pure improvisation is that there's this degree of built-in metaphorical scaffolding to serve as a support system. If I pointed at you right now and said, be funny, what would you do? You look a little scared. Don't be scared. It's okay. But it's hard, right? It's like out of nowhere, do something, be funny, dance, monkey, dance. It's like literally infinite possibilities, but you can't think of anything. It's like if your teacher walked up to you and handed you a piece of paper and said, write something, 500 words, make it good, go. How do you do that? Like, you can, I guess, sort of, but there's this immediate mental paralysis that I think we'd all experience in a situation like this. Structured improvisation, on the other hand, is like a Whose Line Is It Anyway sketch. I don't know if any of you watched that. It's on the CW now, but I started when Drew Carey was hosting pre-Price is Right days. They do all sorts of wacky games inspired by and infused with information from the audience. Like, give me the name of a person, some facts about them, and I will come up with an original song about her right here on the spot. It takes a lot of skill to do and do well, but it's super helpful to have a starting point. A writing prompt, a seed you can water and feed and nurture and help to grow. There are still infinite possibilities in this situation, but like one of our speakers earlier said, it's just now a slightly smaller infinity because it's been focused. And for that reason, I think we need to look at life itself, our individual and collective journeys on this planet as their own structured improvisations, just on the macro level rather than the micro. And in these improvisations, we accept our given circumstances and the rules associated with them as conditions precedent. And by that, I mean our natural abilities and aptitudes, our hopes and dreams, financial situations, living situations, weaknesses, fears, and shortcomings. It's kind of like looking at the stats for your avatar in a video game. And as we develop this astute and thorough mindfulness about our present situation, we say yes. Not in the sense of resigning ourselves to circumstances we're unhappy with or accepting them as what we want for the future, but just simply acknowledging the reality of where we are right now. That's the only way to move through it and begin carving out the future. It's the only way we can figure out where we're going and realistically how we're going to get there. I'll use my college experience as an example. I didn't start at Trinity. I transferred in when I was a sophomore. I'm from Connecticut, and when I was initially applying to schools, I decided not to even look at any in my home state. I was fully committed to having the college experience. And even though I planned to reside on campus, I equated going to school in Connecticut with continuing to live at home. Long story short, I was waitlisted at all of my top choices and ended up at what for me was a safety school. I didn't feel awesome about it, and when I was back home on Christmas break, it really hit me, and the option of a potential transfer began to dance around my head. But I was torn, because I'm the type of person who likes to stick to things when he makes a commitment, whether it's good, bad, or otherwise, and I felt like if I left, I'd be a quitter. But at the same time, I had to ask myself, did I want to spend the next 3.5 years at a place that I felt was kind of a force fit? Did I want to be in my 30s one day, wistfully wondering what it would have been like had I pulled the trigger and made the switch? Now, ultimately, the potential of a better-fitting future pushed me to take the plunge. I applied to 2 liberal arts schools in Connecticut that I should have considered when I was a senior in high school, crossed my fingers that it would work out, and was eventually blessed with an acceptance letter to Trinity. And this only happened because I said yes to how I was feeling. I acknowledged what was real and acted accordingly. I've got a caveat that this wasn't a decision based on some fleeting whim. It wasn't a shallow, grass is always greener kind of thing. The decision to leave my first school was carefully researched, keenly considered, and deeply felt. And ultimately, I ended up where I believe I was always supposed to be. But this doesn't mean my college experience was fated to be this way. When I was initially applying to schools, I firmly believed that I did, in fact, have the capacity to be more thorough and open in my search. Just because I wasn't doesn't mean I couldn't have been. I just elected not to be. I allowed myself to be affected negatively by preconceived notions. Now, this isn't to say that anyone going to the college experience or any major life decision blindly, coming in with a strong point of view and healthy sense of judgment, it's totally imperative. That's the structure part of the improvisation. The problem for me was just that some of my opinions at the time weren't grounded in statistics or reality. And because of this, I made a not so great choice that in turn determined and locked me into what all of my next potential options were. But I can't be too hard on myself. My motives were pure, I was young, and I was improvising. And because of it, now I know how to improvise better. So this begs the question, how do I make sure I'm doing the right thing? When we're aware of the boundless possibilities in any given situation, it can be overwhelming. Because if you choose something, you've inevitably and invariably not chosen a million other things. I had an acting teacher once tell me that in theater, there are no right decisions, just a lot of potentially wrong ones. I don't know if I agree with that across the board in every situation, but the seed of it rings true with me. In acting, we're taught to embrace the happy accidents. Prop falling, a missed line, a broken costume piece. They're things that we don't want or wish to have happen, but if they do, as paradoxical as it sounds, we often welcome them. Because out of the mistake, we can frequently make something beautiful, immediate, and alive. It's this degree of randomness and our response to it that makes art so visceral and exciting. Every night when you're performing a show, every take when you're shooting a movie is room for something new and wonderful. Not necessarily better or worse, just different, happening in this moment. But it only works because we have the infrastructure in place to allow it. And by that I mean our training, our technical support, our administrative support, and an earned confidence in what we have to bring to the table. As an actor, writer, director, and producer, I've been fortunate to work with incredible technicians and artists, both in the limelight and behind the scenes, to bring amazing stories to life. And I've really got to say, when a group of passionate, dedicated, and skillful craftspeople get together, there's no predicting the kind of fire that will ignite. In the best circumstances, it's an unstoppable think tank, a magical conglomeration of thinkers, doers, and dreamers, a perpetual stream of inspiration and action. But without proper preparation, support, and focus, it can be catastrophic, which is why I'm not suggesting a pure improvisation approach to life. Knowing the rules, both how to use them and how to break them appropriately, gives you freedom. Structure of the right type and in the right dosage is what allows for meaningful spontaneity and the ability to choose your own adventure. There's a great play by Nick Payne called Constellations that deals with this too. First got on my radar a few years ago because one of your teachers here let me borrow the script when I was working with her in New England. Recently got on my radar again after I saw a really moving production at home at TheaterWorks in Hartford, Connecticut. That's where this photo's from. The tagline for the play is one relationship, infinite possibilities. Over the course of 70 minutes, we watch 2 actors go through the trajectory of a romantic relationship. Again, and again, and again. The play exists in a kind of multiverse in which, and I'm quoting the show here, every choice, every decision you've ever and never made exists in an unimaginably vast ensemble of parallel universes. We watch brief scenes play out 5, 6, 7, sometimes 10 times in a row, often with slight variations, sometimes with huge variations in words, in tone, and intention. Sometimes the scenes end the same way, sometimes completely differently. But it's always these 2 characters, living, breathing, and choosing. Now, whether or not you believe in this parallel universe stuff, what's awesome about this is that we're watching two people steering themselves through life, directly and immediately affecting their own destinies. At the core of the show is this theme. Out of the immeasurable stars in the night sky, every choice you make connects them in a different way, which in turn opens up a Googleplex of other possible next steps. In effect, as you journey through life, you are creating your own constellation. The play also explores another inescapable truth of the universe, but this one is not as fun. Bad things will happen. As sure as I stand here, this is a fundamental certainty of existence over which we have no control. In Constellations, the female character, Marianne, always develops a serious illness. It's where all the stories lead. Sometimes you can't escape fate. So let's keep connecting this to the real world. Traumatic breakups, death in the families, bad grades, getting screwed over by a colleague. I'm a hopeless romantic and unabashed optimist, but guys, I'm sorry, no matter how hard you try to avoid it, no matter how much you think you've covered every single base, it's gonna happen. But that doesn't mean you should live your life in fear, constantly bracing for impact. The solution, at least the best one that I've found, is just to maintain strong intention in the midst of discomfort, adversity, ambiguity, heartbreak, anger, grief, because the more you wriggle around in quicksand without direction, the faster it's gonna envelop you. The more you panic, the more you're gonna help it pull you down. But if you calm yourself, take your time, even if you feel like the clock is ticking, keep breathing, and work with the sand rather than against it, you stand a far greater chance of making it out alive. Now, of course, the ideal is to never wind up in quicksand in the first place, but like I said, even if you've meticulously mapped out the topography, there's always going to be a surprise. Coming to terms with and accepting that is the first step to making something great. Piece of art, a relationship, your life, or just your morning commute. Because then when something negative and unexpected happens, it won't necessarily have to be an all-consuming catastrophe. Sometimes it can just be a bump in the road. In a weird way, somewhere down the line, you'll end up being almost grateful for some of these experiences. You'll have learned something about yourself and about how to deal with conflict so that you can do better and hopefully avoid a similar situation next time. These moments might leave scars. In fact, they probably will. But there will be stories behind them, and they'll define your character. That said, sometimes it is going to hurt like hell. Sometimes it's more than just growing pains. Sometimes something will happen that really is not okay, for which there's no intrinsic good or silver lining. And your recovery is not going to be elegant. Like a really bad technical error in a theater show, the struggle is going to be obvious to everyone. It's going to be awkward and uncomfortable, but that doesn't mean you stop trying to move through it. Especially in these situations, it is your responsibility to actively recalibrate, to MacGyver your way back when it seems like the light is completely extinguished. Bad things are going to happen, but it is how emotionally and mentally prepared you are, how strong-minded and collaborative you are that will determine if good things will happen too. To sum all this up, I'm going to turn to one of my favorite philosophers, Forrest Gump. He says, I don't know if we each have a destiny, or if we're all just floating around accidental-like on a breeze. But I think maybe it's both. Maybe both are happening at the same time. We're all born with distinct advantages and disadvantages, strengths and handicaps, our own metaphorical box of chocolates. In some ways, this limits us, but in others, it focuses us. And having a holistic appreciation of the personal factors at play allows us to fully utilize them to achieve our goals, to be prepared for and to embrace randomness as it comes. We all have this unbelievable gift of consciousness that unites us, a force that allows us to be both inside and outside of ourselves simultaneously, at once observer and participant, actor, director, and audience of a glorious, structured improvisation, all at the same time. It's this incredible balance of perspectives that allows us to have an awareness of our own potential. But this balance doesn't mean standing still. It never does. By definition, balance is a constant redistribution of weight, remaining quietly grounded and strong and aware of ourselves so that we can respond appropriately to outside stimuli. When paired with an open mind and heart, the more we'll be able to inspire others, the more they'll be able to inspire us, and the more we'll be able to take full advantage of all the surprises that come our way. And those are the makings of a really awesome improv show. Thank you.